Void Miner, Trial of the Century, Part 5, Chapter 21, Shattered Passage. For a moment, Arg almost believed they were through. The viewport showed open black, stars glittering in alien constellations, sharp against the silence. The anomaly was gone. The wound in space closed behind them like it had never been. But the widow told another story. Her hull shivered, a low vibration running down her spine. The lights flickered across the bridge, too sharp and too dim all at once. Navigation coughed out strings of gibberish, recalculating vectors only to collapse back into static. And then the first fracture appeared. A line of light split across the viewport. Not outside, but in. A shimmer like glass cracking between them and the stars. It flickered once, twice, then scattered into a dozen pieces, refracting the starlight into impossible shards. Arg's gut tightened. His hands flew to the controls, forcing stabilizers into correction, rerouting power to dampeners. The ship lurched, nose yawing hard before he wrestled her back. Damn it, not now. Another fracture followed, light scattering in jagged patterns. The stars outside blurred, doubling and tripling, as though time itself staggered. Kara sucked in a breath, her hand gripping the armrest, the other pressed firm against her stomach. "It's not gone," she whispered. Arg swore, eyes locked on the readouts, jittering red across the console. "It's behind us. This is just the echo." But even as he said it, the ship trembled again. Bulkheads creaked. Panels overhead rattled like loose teeth. It wasn't the wormhole anymore, but its shadow was still tearing at them. He hauled the controls hard, sweat streaking his temple, muscles screaming with the effort. Every correction felt like fighting a tide that wanted to split the widow apart. The console spat a hull stress warning, then died mid-sentence, rebooting into static. Arg slammed it with the heel of his hand. "Stay with me, girl. Come on." The widow groaned like she heard him, shivering, but her drives coughed back to life. Guidance flared in uneven pulses. The fractures of light rippled across the viewport, breaking into shards that spun and vanished, only to reappear in new patterns. Time itself stuttered. Stars shifted, then jumped back, like reality was trying to decide which way it should flow. Arg's vision swam with it, his stomach lurching, but his hands stayed steady on the controls. He wouldn't let her break here, not after everything. Kara drew in a sharp breath, her hand clutching her belly tighter. The resonance from the fragments pulsed through her body, jagged and uneven, like a drumbeat out of rhythm. Her voice came low, controlled, but strained. "It's in me too, the echoes." Arg flicked a look at her, his jaw tightening, sweat glistening across his forehead, but her eyes burned steady, glowing faintly in the fractured light. "Hold on," he muttered, forcing the ship level. "It'll pass." But inside, he wasn't sure. The fractures brightened, flaring white-hot, then shattered all at once into threads of brilliance that spidered across the void. For a heartbeat, the widow was caught in a lattice of light, caged in glass that wasn't glass, bound in geometry that bent wrong. The hull shrieked, plates rattled, rivets groaned like they'd snap free. Arg roared, forcing the controls forward, shoving every scrap of power into the drives. The ship bucked, then lurched, engines flaring as she shoved herself free of the lattice. The fractures dissolved, the stars steadied, and at last the widow drifted into stillness. Arg sagged against the harness, chest heaving, sweat dripping down his jaw. His hands trembled on the controls, but he didn't let go until the last warning light blinked green. Kara slumped back in her seat, her eyes closing for a moment before opening again. Her hand stayed firm on her stomach, her breathing measured but shaky. The glow in her eyes dimmed, settling back into the faint shimmer he'd come to recognize. She exhaled slowly, It's gone. Ark stared at the viewport, his jaw set. The stars ahead were still alien, strange constellations twisted into shapes no belt navigator had ever charted. But they were steady. For the first time since the maw swallowed them, they were steady. He leaned back, his voice low. Then we're really here. Kara's gaze followed his. Her hand shifted gently over the swell of her stomach. Here, in a sky no belter had ever seen, and with no way back. Chapter 22. Holding Together. The widow groaned like a wounded thing. Her patched plates flexed against the strain, seams rattling, bulkheads humming with vibrations that hadn't fully settled since the passage. The lights flickered too bright, then dimmed to a sickly glow, refusing to stabilize. Systems bled red warnings across the console, most of them looping the same two words over and over again. Structural compromise. Arg ignored them. His hands stayed locked on the controls, hauling the ship back into balance every time she threatened to yaw off axis. Sweat slicked his palms, muscles burning in his shoulders, but he didn't let go. The widow had never flown pretty, never made it easy. She wasn't about to start now. Come on, he muttered under his breath, voice raw. Hold together just a little longer. Another shudder rolled through the deck, a resonance that seemed to come from nowhere and everywhere at once. The console flickered and died, rebooted, and spat static before crawling back to half function. Arg cursed under his breath, rerouting power through bypassed lines, forcing stabilizers to hold even if they burned out in the process. Beside him, Kara braced herself in the co-pilot's chair. One hand gripped the armrest hard, the other pressed tight across her stomach. Her breathing was measured, but the strain showed in her jaw, the faint tremor of her lips. The fragments in the cargo cradle pulsed erratically, wild, chaotic, like sparks leaping across an exposed wire. Their glow bled into the bridge, bathing Kara in sharp flashes. She closed her eyes for a moment, exhaling slowly. When she opened them again, her gaze locked on the fragments. And then she reached. Not physically. Her hand didn't move, but her presence did. The glow sharpened, the rhythm settling, the jagged pulses smoothing into steadier waves, no longer lashing out but folding inward, wrapping around her like invisible hands. Arg felt the shift even through the controls, the vibrations rattling his bones eased slightly, like the ship itself had taken a breath. Kara whispered, her voice strained but clear. They're shielding me. Arg risked a glance, his jaw tightening. The glow across her eyes shimmered faintly, brighter when the fragments pulsed. Sweat streaked her face, but her posture was firm. Shielding you? His voice came out like gravel. And the child, she said, her hand pressed harder against herself. I can feel it. They're holding us steady, like they know. Arg's gut twisted. The idea of the seed knowing anything about them, let alone about the unborn life inside her, scraped raw against his instincts. But he couldn't deny what he saw. The resonance had calmed around her. Even as the ship buckled, Kara held steady. The widow wasn't so lucky. Another surge rocked the hull, alarm shrieking across the console. Arg yanked the controls hard, forcing his ship back into line. His arms burned, his back screamed, but he gritted his teeth and bore it. The stars outside blurred, doubled, then snapped back into place. Navigation spat out a string of nonsense vectors before crashing into static again. Ark's jaw locked. He forced the drives to steady burn, bleeding power from non-essential systems. Life support cycled harsh, fans screaming against the reroute, but he didn't care. Stay with me, he muttered, eyes fixed on the viewport. You've carried me through worse. The hull groaned like she disagreed, but she didn't give out. Not yet. Kara drew in a sharp breath, her hand clenching against her stomach. Ark's head snapped toward her instinctively. You all right? Her eyes glowed faintly as she met his gaze. Her voice was quiet, but it carried over the hum of the failing ship. "They're protecting us. I can feel the resonance wrapping around me. It's holding steady. Not me doing it. Them." Art ground his teeth. "Not sure that makes me feel any better." "It should," she countered, sharper now. "Because if it weren't for them, I'd be breaking apart in this storm." Her words hit like a stone. Arg turned back to the console, jaw set, forcing himself to focus on keeping the widow intact. He couldn't afford to think about what the seed was doing to Kara, to their child. Not here. Not now. All he could do was keep the ship alive long enough for it to matter. Minutes stretched like hours. The aftershocks came in waves, sudden bursts of distortion that tried to throw the ship into rolls, that rattled the hull with groans deep enough to sound like pain. Arg's muscles screamed from the effort of correcting each one. The consoles flickered, died, came back, died again. But each time, the widow held. Each time, Kara steadied. Her eyes glowed. Her breath was tight. But the fragment's pulse had wrapped her in a strange, alien rhythm. She looked less like she was bracing now, more like she was enduring. Surviving, not in spite of the seed, but because of it. Ark hated it, but he needed it. At last, the resonance eased. The last shudder ran down the ship's spine, a final groan echoing through the hull. Then, quiet. Not silence, not calm, but enough. The stars outside steadied, the fractures gone. The widow drifted, her drives coughing but still alive. The console flickered uncertainly, but the red warnings dimmed, back to orange, then yellow. Ark sagged back into the harness, his breath rough, chest heaving. His arms trembled from the effort of holding her steady. Kara leaned back as well, her hand still pressed across her stomach, her glow faint but steady. "They're fading," she whispered. Ark didn't ask what she meant. He could see it in the fragments, their pulses slowing, dimming back into faint glimmers. The storm had passed, and they were letting her go. He exhaled hard, staring through the viewport. The alien stars waited, sharp and cold. They'd survived the passage. But as Arg sat there, skin cooling against his skin, his hands trembling, he knew the truth. They hadn't beaten it. They'd been carried through. Chapter 23. Emergence. The widow drifted in silence. Not dead. Her drives whispered low. Her hull gave the occasional groan like an old joint. But for the first time since the maw had taken them, she wasn't screaming. The aftershocks had faded. The fractures of light were gone. The stars outside were steady. Steady and utterly alien. Arg sat hunched in the pilot's chair, his forearms braced on his knees, sweat cooling against his skin. His hands still trembled faintly from the strain of holding her together. His eyes, bloodshot and raw, stayed fixed on the viewport. Constellations stretched in patterns no belter had ever charted. The stars burned sharp, but wrong. He couldn't name a single one. No Titan, no hub, no belt, no way back. Kara shifted in the co-pilot's chair. The fragments in the cargo cradle had dimmed, their pulses slow and steady now, like embers cooling after a fire. She pressed her hand gently across her stomach, exhaling slowly. Her eyes glowed faintly as she turned to him. "It's over." Ark didn't answer at first. He couldn't. His gaze stayed locked on the stars, his jaw tight, breath shallow. When he finally spoke, his voice was low, hoarse. "We're not in Soul anymore." Kara's brow furrowed faintly. She didn't correct him. He leaned forward, fists tightening against his knees. "We're not anywhere mapped, not anywhere known. That gate, it didn't spit us across the belt, or the hub, or the moons. It threw us out." His head shook slowly, his voice thick. We're in another damned galaxy. The word tasted bitter in his mouth. Another galaxy. He thought he'd seen some distance before. Months in the black. Years of drift between rocks. But this was different. This was more than distance. This was separation. Cut off. Alone. His chest ached with the weight of it. Everything he'd fought for. Everything they'd built. The guild. The orphans' station. The fragile ties between belters who had never agreed on anything. All of it was behind him now. A wormhole away. A wormhole that no longer existed. He ground his teeth, forcing down the surge of rage that had threatened to rise. He couldn't punch this problem. He couldn't fly around it. The seed had made its choice, and it hadn't asked. Kara's voice broke the silence, softer now. It was always leading us forward, never back. He turned his head, meeting her gaze. Her glow reflected faintly off the dim lights of the bridge, steady despite her exhaustion. Forward into what? His voice cracked. He gestured towards the viewport, toward the alien stars. Look at it. None of it's ours. None of it's charted. We're ghosts out here. Her hand slid across her stomach, slow, deliberate. Not ghosts. His jaw tightened. She held his gaze. We're carrying life. The words landed heavy. Arg's eyes flickered to her hand, then back to her face. He wanted to argue, wanted to spit that the sea didn't care about life, that it had dragged them there with no thought for the child she carried. But the words stuck to his throat, because even if the sea didn't care, she did. And so did he. He leaned back slowly in the chair, scrubbing a rough hand over his face. His chest heaved with another breath, heavy but steadier. The stars outside still looked wrong, still looked like exile. But he wasn't alone, not anymore. For a long time they sat in silence. The widow hummed faintly beneath them, system stabilizing by inches. The fragments glowed faintly, no longer wild, but watchful, like they'd simply gone to sleep with one eye open. Arg let his breath slow. His grip on the armrests eased, though the tension never fully left his shoulders. He stared through the viewport again. The alien sky didn't look any less wrong. But this time, he didn't see only distance. He saw a place the seed had chosen, and that meant something waited. Kara's voice came again, quiet but certain. We made it through. Arg's jaw shifted. He didn't nod, didn't agree, but he didn't argue either. Because for the first time since the maw had swallowed them, he almost believed it. Chapter 24. First Scans. The widow drifted steady now, her patched hull groaning only in quiet protest instead of near collapse. Systems pulsed back to life one by one, the consoles no longer screaming in red, but flickering in pale orange and green. It was enough. Arg sat hunched over the pilot's chair, his shoulders rigid, eyes locked on the console. His hands moved with raw precision, coaxing data from half-broken systems. Every motion was slow, deliberate, like handling brittle glass. The widow wasn't built for exploration. Her sensors were crude, her processors outdated. But she was all he had, and she had always given him what he needed, even if it was less than what he wanted. This time, she gave him more than he expected. The scan swept outward. Lines of data crawled across the console, fractured at first, then stitching into clearer shapes. Arg's eyes narrowed as planetary signatures appeared, faint but steady. 1, 2, then more. A cluster of planets circled the alien sun, some small barren rocks with nothing to their name, others shrouded in thick gases too dense for life. And then, a world lit with color. The widow's crude sensors painted it in shades of blue and green, oceans and forests sprawling wide. Clouds swirled in its atmosphere, storms curling across its surface like living breath. Ark's chest tightened. Life world, he muttered. Beside him, Kara leaned forward, her hand pressed against her stomach. Her eyes caught the faint green glow of the scans. It's alive. Ark nodded once, his jaw tight. Yeah. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The screen pulsed faintly, the image stabilizing into a world that felt almost too bright after everything they'd seen. A place that could hold them. A place they could almost believe in. But the seed didn't care about belief. The fragments pulsed in their cradle, a sharp resonance cutting through the ship. The console flickered. Another world appeared. Not vibrant, not alive. Barren. Its surface radiated nothing but desolation. No oceans, no forests, no storms. Just dry stone and silence. And yet the seed hummed at its signature, thrumming through the widow with deliberate insistence. The glow of the fragments sharpened, their rhythm undeniable. Ark's jaw tightened, his fist curled against the console. Kara whispered, her voice low. It wants us there. Ark didn't look at her. His eyes stayed locked on the barren rock, teeth grinding. Of course it does. The data scrolled faster now, as though the seed itself was pressing the ship to see it clearer. The barren world wasn't just stone. It glowed faintly in the sensors, a resonance no natural geology should throw. A beacon. A trial. Arg leaned back slowly, his shoulders heavy. His chest ached with the weight of it. They had crossed the impossible. Another galaxy, another sky. And still, the seed called them forward. No rest, no reprieve. Kara's hand pressed gently against her stomach. She was close now, near the end. The strain plain in her eyes. But she didn't speak against it. She didn't try to argue. She only whispered, steady and quiet. It's waiting. Ark's gaze locked hard on the barren rock. For the first time since the maw swallowed them, he let the truth out of his chest. Yeah, he muttered. So are we. The console steadied, the scans finalized. One vibrant world alive with possibility. One barren world humming with demand. The widow's drives groaned, waiting for his command. And Arg sat in silence, jaw tight, knowing which one the seed had already chosen. Chapter 25. The Course Set. The Dust Widow drifted in the kind of stillness that frightened even the machines. After the storm of light and motion that had torn them from everything known, the silence felt unnatural, like the breath drawn after a scream that never finished. Arg sat strapped in the pilot's chair, hands slack on the armrest, eyes locked on a sky that didn't belong to him. Every constellation on the screen was wrong. The familiar cross of Orion, the steady wink of Mars's pale red, gone. In their place, a spill of stars packed too close together, bright as spilled solder across black glass. He'd already scanned them twice. Carr had done it once more just to prove it wasn't an error. All three of the results were the same. Star catalog unresolved. Location unknown. Arg rubbed his temple. We're nowhere. Kara's voice, low and tired, answered from the co-pilot's chair. No, we're somewhere. Just not anywhere that knows us. Her tone carried the kind of quiet calm that only comes from sheer exhaustion. The console light painted her face silver blue, tracing the lines that worry had carved there. Her breathing was slow, measured, and beneath it Arg could hear the faint rhythm of the ship's life support. Steady, indifferent, alive when everything else felt dead. He forced himself to check the boards again. Pressure nominal. Heat steady. Reactor stable. The widow lived. Whether they should call that a victory was another matter. From somewhere deep in the hull came a soft metallic chime, the unmistakable note of one of the fragments shifting in its mount. A moment later, another answered, lower, almost harmonic. Then silence again. Kara turned her head toward the med bay bulkhead. They're restless. Arg nodded. So am I. A pulse ran through the deck, faint but deliberate. Every display blinked once and stabilized, their blue glow deepening to that uncanny shade that always preceded a seed event. Arg's stomach tightened. And here we go. He watched the main nav console light up on its own, the map expanding outward, searching, mapping new orbital bodies that the Widow's sensor barely understood. One by one, planets appeared. 5, a thin ring of debris, and a bloated gas giant with a single satellite the color of ash. The pulse came again. Every marker but one dimmed. Only the moon remained bright. Kara whispered, It's calling. Arg's jaw clenched. Of course it is. He leaned forward and tapped the console anyway, because some part of him refused to let the thing think it owned him. Temperature -100. Atmosphere thin. Trace methane. Oxygen near zero. No radio. No movement. Nothing. He exhaled through his teeth. Perfect. Kara shifted, one hand resting unconsciously over her stomach. The child had been quiet since the wormhole. Now she felt it stir again, a slow pressure under her ribs. She met his eyes. It wants us there. Arg looked at the barren sphere, turning in this display. Yeah, I know. He didn't touch the thrusters. Not yet. He sat there instead, letting the glow from the seed fill the cockpit. Every nerve in him wanted to move, to do something, but he held still, just long enough to feel the ship breathe around him. Minutes passed. The hum of the systems faded into a rhythm, almost like a heartbeat. It wasn't the engines. It was the seed. Kara watched him. You're waiting for it to ask nicely? I'm waiting for it to make a mistake. It never does. He gave a humorless laugh. That's what worries me. He rose from the chair, knees stiff, and walked to the viewport. Outside, the dust of the new system glittered faintly in the distant light of its sun. The colors were wrong there too, slightly green, too sharp around the edges, as though the light itself carried a different recipe. His reflection stared back at him, stubble grown in gray, eyes red-rimmed, the look of a man who'd run out of ways to flinch. Behind him, Kara whispered, We made it through, Arg. Through what? The impossible. He looked down at his hands. Funny thing about the impossible, it just resets the bar. A faint laugh slipped from her, tired but real. You should rest. So should you. I can't. Her gaze dropped to her belly. He doesn't like it when I sleep. Every time I close my eyes, he kicks. Ark's face softened. Takes after you, then. She smirked. You mean stubborn? I mean alive. That ended the conversation. They let silence have the rest. Hours blurred. Arg cycled through systems checks, calibrated sensors that didn't need it, rechecked power distribution for the third time. It wasn't working. It was his penance. Each task kept him from the thought gnawing at the back of his mind. What if there's no way back at all? The seed pulsed again, gentle this time, almost coaxing. The nav path brightened. He ignored it. Kara finally broke the quiet. The fragments are resonating. He turned, listening. She was right. The air carried a low hum now, subsonic but steady. It vibrated through the metal, through their bones. She grimaced, rubbing her temple. It's like it's inside my head. Arg checked the containment readout. Field integrity holding. No energy bleed. Then why can I feel it? He didn't answer. He didn't have one. She closed her eyes, breathing slow until the pulse eased. It's the same rhythm as before. Tighten? She nodded. Except stronger. Cleaner. He looked back at the console. Then it's learning. Or remembering. Her voice made him pause. He turned back, brow furrowing. What do you mean? The seed. The fragments. They're part of whatever made this. Maybe they're going home. Ark stared at her a long time before answering. Then what does that make us? The ones holding the door open. He didn't like the sound of that. Not our job. It might not care. Another pulse, firmer. The nav line corrected itself again to the barren moon. The timing felt deliberate, almost conversational. Ark muttered under his breath. You really can't take a hint, can you? Kara's eyes flicked open. Talking to it again? He grunted. Someone has to. He switched the display to long-range spectral analysis. The ship's AI core still refused to engage without the seed's override, so he did the math by hand. There was faint electromagnetic resonance coming off the moon, regular as a metronome, too weak for communication, too perfect for accident. Kara leaned over to look. Signal? He nodded. Repeating, but not in any code I know. Could be structural. He frowned. Like the chambers. Her silence was answer enough. Arg leaned back in his chair. You think that's where they built them? Or buried them. He ran a hand through his hair. The gesture, half laugh, half curse. Wonderful. Her tone softened. It was never going to end easy, Arg. Yeah, but it didn't have to end there. She looked at the barren moon again, eyes distant. Maybe it does. The pulse from the seed deepened. A single, heavy thud that made the lights sway. The console flickered. A line of alien glyphs rolled across the lower screen. Same symbols as the Titan chamber. Ark stared at them, jaw tight. Translation? None. He didn't need one. The seed's intent was clear as a shove between the shoulders. Kara's voice was barely a whisper. It's telling us to come home. He let out a low breath. Then home's about to get crowded. Later, he recorded a log because he couldn't stop himself. Habit was the only order left. Captain's log, Arg Arston. Location, unidentified system. Star type, G5. Estimated position, unknown. Maybe 200 million light years from Sol. Crew status, 2 souls alive. Seed status, active, guidance locked. Objective, unspecified. Destination, barren satellite of outer planet. Note, I don't like the quiet. Feels like waiting. He closed the log and sat there a long time after the recorder light went dark. Kara's breathing had steadied again. She was half asleep, one hand unconsciously tracing circles over her belly. The glow from the seed chamber painted her face in gentle blue. Ark watched, remembering the sound of belt engines and dock chatter and the way silence used to mean peace. Now, it only meant pause. He whispered toward the containment bay. You've got what you wanted. You win. Just don't take her too. The seed didn't answer. It never did. But the pulse eased, slow and satisfied. Hours later, the nav console chimed softly, a sound Arg hadn't heard since before the war. A route line brightened, finalizing on its own. Beneath the coordinate stream appeared a single human-readable prompt, translated through whatever part of the seed still remembered mercy. Trajectory locked. Awaiting manual confirmation. Ark stared at it. For the first time in all these years, it was asking. He didn't touch it. Not yet. He turned to Kara instead. You awake? Her eyes opened slowly. Wasn't asleep. You feel it too? She nodded. It's waiting. Then maybe it's learned something after all. Or it's letting us think we have a choice. Arg half smiled. That's close enough to kindness for me. She shifted, wincing slightly. Arg, he was beside her before she finished that word. What is it? Nothing. Just pressure. She took a breath. He's restless. He rested a hand lightly over hers. He's got your timing. She smiled weakly. Let's hope he doesn't have your patience. He laughed under his breath. Patience kept us alive. Barely. Her fingers tightened around his. Whatever happens down there, we finish it. Together. Always. The seed pulsed again. Gentle. Rhythmic. The console's glow deepened to match it. The waiting prompt blinked once. Arg looked back to the screen. It's time. Kara nodded. Then set the course. He stared at the word manual a heartbeat longer, then pressed the control. The hum of the Widow's engines rose around them, smooth, calm, obedient. The inertial dampeners engaged with a sigh. For the first time since the wormhole, everything worked perfectly. Arg watched the barren moon grow larger in the viewport, a gray coin against the stars. Destination's locked. Kara's voice came quiet but steady. Then it begins again. He nodded once, jaw tight. Yeah. The seed pulsed a final time in affirmation, the sound of a door closing somewhere far beyond sight. The widow moved as if she had finally remembered how to breathe. Arg had flown her through belt storms, reactor blowouts, helix ambushes, and alien anomalies that made physics turn in on itself. But he had never felt her this quiet. No rattle in the deck, no pulse of imbalance through the yoke. Just a slow, obedient hum that made the hull feel almost alive. She's flying herself, Kara said, voice low. Arg's hands rested on the console, not steering, just feeling the faint vibrations beneath his palms. I'm starting to think she always has. The seed's glow deepened through the containment glass behind them, a steady heartbeat of blue-white light that bathed the cockpit in ghost color. The fragments on the rack floated millimeters above their cradles, each one rotating in slow counterphase. The hum they gave off settled into the same rhythm as Kara's pulse. Arg checked the orbital telemetry. We're descending into synchronous drift, 2,000 kilometers above the surface. Kara shifted in her seat, her breath catching at the motion. He's awake again. The baby? She nodded, a faint smile ghosting her lips. Every time it pulses, he moves, like he's listening. Arg frowned. Let's hope he doesn't start taking orders. That earned him the smallest laugh, brittle but real. Don't tempt fate. Fate's already tempted us, he said. We're just late to notice. The barren moon rolled below, gray, cracked, ancient. Through the thin atmosphere, streaks of dust spiraled like smoke trails. Sensors flicked as if uncertain whether the world beneath them existed or only wanted to. Arc magnified the surface feed. There it was. Geometry against chaos. A hexagonal shape etched into a crater. Faint light pulsing from its center. Kara's hand came to her mouth. Another chamber. He said nothing. He didn't need to. Every line of it mirrored what they'd seen on Titan. Though this one seemed larger, older, somehow unfinished, and waiting. Arg tapped the commands to run deep scan. Metallic content off the charts. Energy field just below surface. It's live, Kara whispered. Then it's calling. The seed pulsed again, and the whole ship answered. Arg gritted his teeth as the nav path locked fully, the control column sliding under its own power until the widow's nose aligned with the faintly glowing coordinates. He could have fought it, could have killed the thrusters. But for what? They both knew the seed always found another way to make them obey. He let go. You win. For the next hour, the widow descended through nothingness. No clouds, no drag, only the long, slow curve downward. The faint shimmer of atmospheric particles scraped against the hull, hissing like rain that had forgotten how to fall. Arg ran diagnostics just to keep his hands working. Kara watched out the viewport, silent, her eyes reflecting the growing light below. Remember the first one? She said softly. He glanced at her. How could I forget? I thought that was the end of us. He nodded once. Maybe it was. Everything after has been something borrowed. She smiled at that, though it didn't reach her eyes. Then we'd better make the most of the loan. At 100 kilometers, the structure's details sharpened. Massive plates of smooth alloy, forming plates around a dark core. Lightning danced slowly along the edges, drawn toward the widow, but never touching. Arg watched the instruments warily. Atmosphere's thin, but breathable at surface level. Radiation nominal. No visible life. Kara's hands tightened on the armrest. But it's watching. He looked over. What? She pointed through the viewport. Look. For a moment, he saw nothing. Then he saw everything. The dust itself moved in the spiral that matched the seed's pulse, lifting in patterns too deliberate to be wind. The whole planet seemed to breathe with them. Arg muttered, That's not possible. Neither was any of this, Kara said quietly. Maybe it's just following the rhythm. He almost answered, but stopped. He'd spent years trying to define what could and couldn't be possible. The universe kept correcting him. They'd reached low orbit. The seed dimmed as if satisfied. The fragments settled back into their mounts. Their rotation ceased in perfect unison. Arg exhaled, then rubbed the back of his neck. Whatever it is, it's patient. Or confident, Kara said. It knows we'll come. Arg turned to face her fully. You still want to go through with this? Her answer was instant. We don't have a choice. He nodded. That's not the same thing. No, she said softly. It's worse. He rose, stretching out the stiffness in his legs. We'll hold here for now. I want to run a full orbital scan. Maybe get a map before we drop. Kara's eyes followed him as he moved across the cockpit, fingers brushing the cold steel of the bulkhead. Maps didn't help on Titan. Doesn't mean I've forgotten how to make one. She smiled faintly. You can't help yourself. He gave her a sideways look. Neither can you. Her hand pressed against her belly again. He's strong. Too strong sometimes. He'll need to be. She didn't argue. There was no room for comfort left between them, only shared endurance. The ship's computer pinged a soft alert. Art glanced at the display. Surface transmission detected. Frequency undetermined. He frowned and brought up the waveform. It wasn't a signal. It was a pattern. A rising and falling hum that mirrored the seed's bass resonance. He let it play through the speakers. The sound filled the cockpit like breath. Not mechanical, not quite alive. A vibration that seemed to reach through his chest and grip the bone itself. Kara shuddered. It feels familiar. It's the same tone from Titan's door, Arg said. Only this time, it's inviting. The hum deepened. The light from the seed flared bright enough to wash out every other color. The controls moved again, thrusters aligning for descent. Kara whispered, "Arg?" He nodded. "I know." The widow dipped its nose and began to fall. Thin clouds, if they could be called that, peeled away in ribbons of dust. Lightning crawled in sheets across the hull, tracing the seed's outline in blinding arcs that vanished as quickly as they appeared. The noise wasn't noise at all, but vibration, as though the air itself vibrated in time with the fragments. Arg gripped the controls, but didn't fight. He was only a witness. Through the viewport, the ground swelled upward, gray turning to silver, silver to the faint shimmer of metal dust. The structure at the center of the crater loomed, larger with every second. Kara's breath hitched. "It's the same design, the same metal." Arg nodded. "And the same end waiting." He spared a glance at her, sweat along her temple, eyes fixed forward. Her other hand rested over the small rise of her stomach. "You should strap in." She managed a dry smile. "You forget who I am." "Hard to." The ship trembled at first. Atmospheric contact flared along the hull. Heat rippled through the cockpit. Warning lights flickered briefly before extinguishing themselves. The seed didn't tolerate warnings. "Descent velocity stabilizing," Arg said. "Impacts burn in 20. Kara's gaze didn't waver. "It feels different this time." He knew what she meant. The air itself seemed alive, the static licking along their skin despite the suits still sealed around them. Even the ship's shadows moved slower, as if light had thickened. "Yeah," he said quietly. "It knows we're ready." The structure filled the viewport, a vast, open aperture at its center, rimmed by carved alloy ribs that glowed faintly from within. Symbols traced across its surface like veins. The seed hummed in response. Arg said, "That's our door." Kara swallowed hard. "We just go in?" "Like always." She stared at the impossible geometry below them. "What if this time it closes?" He gave her a half smile. "Then we stop pretending there's ever been a way out." The words didn't comfort either of them, but they were honest. The final descent engaged. The widow's thrusters flared blue, slowing them as they entered the crater. Dust rose in waves that danced with static fire. The light from the aperture bathed the hull in white. Arg glanced at her again. "Hold tight." She already was. The ship settled into the rim of the structure with a sound like a sigh. No impact, no jolt. Just weight returning after too long a drift. For a moment, neither spoke. Arg shut down the engines. The hum faded to silence. Only the seed's pulse remained. He stood slowly. "You stay seated till I check the air." Kara shook her head. "Not this time. We go together." He hesitated, meeting her eyes. There was no arguing with that look. There never had been. "Suit check," he said finally. "Pressure's good. O2 full." He sealed his own helmet and keyed the hatch cycle. The outer airlock hissed open, a wash of pale dust spilling inside. Arg turned once more toward her. "Ready?" She nodded. "Always." The ramp extended, steam curling around its edges. The air outside shimmered with light. Neither warm nor cold, just present, as if waiting to be seen. Together they stepped out. The ground beneath their boots rang like metal. The structure stretched away in every direction, an endless surface of etched alloy. In the center, the aperture yawned, perfectly circular, its inner walls alive with light that pulsed like breath. Arg's voice came over the comms. "Same design, bigger scale." Kara looked at its towering ribs arching overhead. "It's beautiful." "It's a tomb." She ignored the remark and took another careful step forward. Her suit sensors flickered between breathable and null readings. "Air's thin, but stable." Arg scanned the entrance. "I don't like that it's open." "Maybe it's waiting." "For what?" She looked at him. For us. The seed pulsed once, hard enough that the ground vibrated. The lights within the aperture brightened, spiraling inward toward darkness. Arg felt it in his chest, that old instinct to run. He forced himself to stand still. Kara's voice came through the comms, soft, steady. It's time. He looked back at her. You sure? No, she said, but it doesn't matter. They moved together toward the light. The last thing Arg saw before crossing the threshold was the widow behind them, silent, waiting, her hull reflecting the same glow that swallowed them both. Then there was only white. The end of Part 5 of Void Miner, Trial of the Century.